The Clockmaker's Gift. In a quiet town nestled between two misty hills, there lived an old clockmaker named Elias. His shop stood at the end of a cobblestone street, its windows always fogged with the scent of oil, metal, and time itself. Though Elias had no family and few friends, everyone in town knew him for his unmatched craftsmanship. Clocks of every kind, grandfather clocks, cuckoo clocks, pocket watches, ticked in perfect harmony on the walls of his little shop. Elias had a secret. Hidden in the back room behind heavy curtains and dusty books was a clock unlike any other. It was tall, its frame carved from black oak, and in place of numbers, it bore ancient runes. Its pendulum was a glowing crystal, and its tick was more like a heartbeat than a sound. Elias had been working on it for over 40 years, ever since he found a strange journal in his grandfather's attic, the journal of a man who claimed to have built a clock that could turn back time. Each night, Elias would wind the mysterious clock, adjust its gears, and write notes in his own journal. He had never tried to use it. Not until the day he received a letter from a hospital, informing him that a woman named Margaret, his childhood love, was gravely ill and would not live to see the new year. The news struck Elias like a hammer. He had lost her once before, many years ago, when he was too proud to follow her to the city. Now, he might lose her forever. That night, Elias stood before the ancient clock. He placed his hand on the glowing pendulum and whispered the date he wanted to return to, June 17, 1965, the day Margaret left. The room pulsed with a warm light. The ticking slowed. And then, silence. When Elias opened his eyes, he was standing on the old train platform, the summer sun warming his back. Margaret was there, suitcase in hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. He ran to her, heart pounding, calling her name. She turned, her eyes wide with surprise, and for a moment, time truly stood still. This time, Elias didn't let her go. They built a life together in the city, one filled with laughter, arguments, children, and quiet evenings. Elias never spoke of the clock again. He didn't need to. The second chance was enough. Years later, long after Elias had passed, their granddaughter found a strange black clock in the attic of their old home. It was stopped at June 17, 1965, and it never ticked again. When the sky turned blue again. It was the summer of 2012 when Emma first saw Liam. She was sitting by the window of her favorite bookstore cafe in a sleepy town on the Oregon coast, sipping on a lukewarm latte and flipping through a worn-out copy of The Little Prince. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked a boy with storm-colored eyes, a camera hanging from his neck, and a journal clutched under one arm. He looked like he had stories to tell, stories written not just in words, but in the way he looked at the world. Emma didn't believe in love at first sight, not until that moment. They met again 2 days later, when she dropped her scarf while walking down the pier. Liam picked it up, smiled, and handed it back with a single sentence that changed everything: "You dropped this piece of sky." From that day on, they were inseparable. Their love unfolded slowly, like pages in a novel they were writing together. They spent rainy afternoons building blanket forts and sunny mornings chasing the sunrise in his beat-up Jeep. They talked about books, dreams, fears, and what the stars might be trying to say. Emma painted with words. Liam captured with light. Together, they built something beautiful. But life, like weather, changes without warning. Liam got an offer to work as a photojournalist in Nepal, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Emma encouraged him to go, even though every part of her wanted to beg him to stay. They promised to keep in touch, to write, to wait. Weeks turned into months. Letters slowed. Video calls dropped. And eventually, silence stretched between them like an ocean too wide to swim. Emma tried to move on. She threw herself into her writing. Published her first novel. Told herself that love wasn't meant to last forever, that some people are just chapters, not the whole story. Then, 3 years later, on the anniversary of the day they met, she returned to the bookstore cafe, more out of nostalgia than hope. She sat by the window, now older, quieter, wiser. The doorbell chimed. And there he was. Liam. Thinner, a little sunburned, but with the same stormy eyes. He walked up to her without hesitation, dropped an old, faded scarf on the table, and said, "I brought your sky back." They didn't need to say much after that. Some stories, the best ones, don't end, they just pause. Letters from the Lighthouse. It was the summer of 1995 when Clara first arrived in the small coastal town of Evermore. She had taken a sabbatical from her job as a history professor in New York, hoping the ocean breeze and isolation would help her recover from a recent heartbreak. She rented a cottage on a cliff, not far from the town's century-old lighthouse. Every evening, she walked along the shoreline, the waves whispering memories she was trying to forget. One evening, she noticed a man near the lighthouse, sketching in a notebook. He was tall, with messy brown hair and a quiet kind of intensity. He looked up and smiled politely, then returned to his sketch. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed often. She learned his name was Elias, a marine biologist turned painter, who had returned to Evermore to care for his aging father. He was reserved but kind, with a dry wit and a love for the sea that mirrored her own fascination with the past. Their conversations were slow, unhurried, like the tide, sometimes light, sometimes deep. They began to meet intentionally, over coffee at the local diner, during long walks, in the warm silence of the beach at sunset. He showed her his paintings, raw and emotional, many of them of the lighthouse. She shared stories of ancient civilizations, love lost and found again in dusty scrolls and forgotten ruins. Then one evening, as the golden light bathed the cliffs, Elias handed Clara a letter. It was the first of many. He said he found it easier to say certain things in writing. His letters were poetic, vulnerable, filled with sketches and words that painted feelings he hadn't spoken aloud. Clara responded with letters of her own, slipped under the lighthouse door. Over the summer, the letters became a ritual. They poured their hearts into ink and paper, fears, dreams, moments of joy. Through these letters, they fell deeply, quietly, undeniably in love. But summer was ending, and Clara had to choose between returning to her old life or building a new one. On her last day in Evermore, she climbed the lighthouse stairs, a final letter in hand. Elias was there, waiting, holding a letter of his own. "I wrote this last night," he said, "but I'd rather tell you in person." Clara smiled, tears in her eyes. "So would I." They didn't need the letters anymore. Years later, visitors to Evermore still find old, weathered letters tucked in the cracks of the lighthouse. No one knows who left them, but locals say they're part of a love story that never really ended.